given China's response in terms of retaliation, the main bargaining, it seems, is going to be between the U.S. and China. And the question then is, at what point will the two sides find some way to negotiate the matter, de-escalate it? Not something that's going to be easily resolved.
搞保护主义，如同把自己关入黑屋子，看似躲过了风吹雨打，但也隔绝了阳光和空气。打贸易战的结果只能是两败俱伤。
China does oftentimes claim in terms of the rhetoric that it is supporting international trade rules, etc., but it certainly is not. So his visit now to Southeast Asia is trying to solidify the relationship mainly through very practical economic incentives to increase their trade ties with China and maybe even their political ties with China. Whether he'll succeed or not is not very clear. I was in Beijing from 2001 to 2005, just as China entered WTO at the end of 2001. So one of our main jobs was essentially to work with China to try to get them to understand WTO rules and work with them on tie-ins. But obviously, it's quite clear now that over the years, even from 2005 on to the present, China continues to carry out many what we would consider to be unfair trade practices, including, for example, what they call government procurement agreement, which is that foreign companies would be able to sell to Chinese government agencies services or equipment, whatnot. They promised in 2001 when they entered, adopt that right away or as soon as possible. So one example is that until now, they have not yet accepted it. One main issue that was raised by the Section 301 report is the so-called joint venture requirement. Whenever American companies wanted to sell to China, to export to China, a lot of them, services, banking, insurance, companies in general, they have to find a Chinese partner. Of course, it meant that the Chinese company would be able to get a lot of the intellectual property. In China, it's very much a state-controlled market economy, which essentially means that the Chinese government can do anything they want. For example, the biggest issue now is they would subsidize steel manufacturing, they would subsidize EV, therefore dumping these products, exporting it en masse at fairly cheap cost to the world. The WTO has received about over 600 dispute settlement cases, really overburdening this organization. By the time you finish it, there's no enforcement capability, and countries who lose case could, in simply many ways, just ignore it. Now we're getting to the stage where, for better or for worse, Trump has also beginning to ignore the international trade system and simply say, we're going to take action. Even under Biden, we would take now like export controls in terms of prohibiting certain export of technologies to China. Currently, at least, Trump is doing in a very emphatic way, maybe going overboard. What China is now doing, all I can do is observe it, is trying to impose some cost on the U.S. So, for example, it's doing it on agriculture. I would say they're also not looking only at the soybean farmers and all that, they're looking at American companies. By doing that and squeezing it and so on, emphasizing that, obviously Apple and others will, I'm sure, lobby the Trump administration. In one case, for example, Boeing. Whenever there was a big problem, they would go to Boeing and said, okay, we're now not buying airplanes from you anymore. We're going to buy it from Airbus, from Europe. And so Boeing would come in to see us at the embassy and other places and say, hey, this is going to have a major impact on us, what you're doing here. All I know is that there is this actual bargaining going on, not negotiation, but just by action. They're clearly sending signals that all of this will harm U.S. interests. And so the question is, what does he do and what does Trump do and how do they respond? Strengthen their own position, or do they try to make some concession? At some point, maybe it will move towards some negotiation. I would say it'll be very difficult because, Chinese are tough negotiators. And Xi Jinping cannot afford to really feel like he lost or concede.